When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, everybody. It is 11:36 right here on the Elias Macko Show. I'm going to start things off here on the last half hour of the show with a thought exercise. So right now, as you're driving on the road, maybe you're in your home, working in the office, just take a few moments here. I'm asking you this question right now. When you hear the words Hockey Canada, what's going through your mind right now? You know, over the last little while, boy, the headlines, if it involves Hockey Canada, boy, can you think of a brand that has become more blemished in a short period than Hockey Canada? You know, it was a couple of weeks ago, it was 2 Fridays ago on the Big Five at 9:05. I think we had the first honest discussion about Hockey Canada that I've heard in media. I think we are doing stories here sometimes where we're not even trying to get facts. We're not actually trying to figure out what is actually been accused in these situations, but we want to judge. And I just got alert yesterday, right? Alert pops up. Hockey Canada has paid out $7.6 million in settlements. And boy, you see that headline, and then you're like, wow, this must be the worst organization of all time, right? But I do think there's more to this story. That's why I wanted to have Ari Goldkind on the program. Criminal defense lawyer, CTV legal analyst, and, you know, he's a criminal defense lawyer, but he does not mind seeing bad people go to jail. I just want to point that out. Ari, welcome to the show.
I think that's one of the more generous introductions I've had in 10 years of doing this with CJAD. I'm proud to hear you say that. And if you want me to go a step further, I think not enough people go to jail, but I'll digress.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Ari, this is why, and I know you've shared some thoughts on social media on this subject, okay? And I listen, I want your take here, right? You know, when you see a headline, 8 hockey players, sexual assault, you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is the worst. How dare they cover up all this? So give me your perspective on this, the legal perspective on what we know happened and what we know Hockey Canada did or did not do about it.
So as you always do, you ask a question in a very precise way, and precision is important and lacking in our anti-social media day and age, which, as you know, I'll never call it social media. It is very hard for people here to actually know what's going on and separate out the legal from the political. And in fact, the legal cannot be separated out from the political. What do I mean by that? This is actually not a scandal. The more that comes out, and I said this from day one, I knew this was a political exercise to distract us from inflation, crime, every other hot button issue, gas, groceries you can come up with. This is not a scandal. What is the scandal? The scandal is just how much Hockey Canada is being raked over the coals by people who do not understand how the sausage was made. What we have, and the facts matter, we have 2 big incidents, the 2003 one that people are just starting to hear about, and the 2018 one, which most people are familiar with. And in 2018, even with the 2 days of committee hearings so far, which are the most colossal waste of taxpayer and MP time I've ever seen in my life, and I see lots of money being wasted in that city, you have a young woman that in 2018 did not want to participate in an investigation by one of the top and most expensive law firms in the country with one of the top law firms. Now, why is that important? Because everybody presumes these 8 young men who have been tarred and feathered are rapists or have committed sexual assault. I'm no bleeding heart. The young woman then goes to the police. They look into this and they say there's nothing to see here. And you don't have enough time on your show because you have sponsors and breaks you must take for me to explain how rare it is post Gomeshi and post a Globe and Mail article called Unfounded that your listeners should Google only when your show's off the air, not while we're talking, that makes it almost impossible for police to not lay charges because there's tremendous political pressure post-Gomeshi and post the Globe and Mail article to charge any single man that anybody accuses of sexual assault. Somebody could know you're in the studio right now, your name is Elias Makos. They could say that at 11:37, Elias sexually assaulted them on the Metro, and you're going to get charged, okay? Now, I'm being facetious, but I'm not really being facetious. Yeah. London police does not charge her, okay? And I'm going to get to the punchline does not charge anybody. I'm going to get to the punchline in a moment. The very expensive law firm, $237,000 of legal fees, one of the finest lawyers in Canada, closes down her investigation because the complainant doesn't want to participate. Then we talk about the reserve and the slush fund. You'll know that that's a big issue, I'm sure, top of the mind as well. They pay out this young woman's wishes for a big, big check, even though there is no victim. There's nobody charged. The evidence is not tested. Why do they do that? They do that on their accounting, Elias, and this is why, to me, the scandal is just how much this situation is misunderstood or misused. They do that because they say if we ask her any questions or if we allow our insurance carrier to actually take a look at this, they're going to want to talk to her and see if her statement that the sex maybe wasn't consensual, even though there's evidence and suggestion that at least that's an open question, we don't want to traumatize her by having the insurance company ask her a single question. So we wrote the check to her, which we do, and we put this to rest. And as you mentioned, Elias, this fund that everybody points to, this slush fund, reserve fund, was used for Graham James, a notorious case, which is totally different from the rest of this. So the scandal here, if you ask me, what is the scandal, is just how spineless and gutless Hockey Canada has been, rather than going before the committee and bending over and saying, we did this wrong and we did that and we're bad people. They should have stood up and said, we did everything by the book. We involved lawyers throughout. The young woman was represented by excellent counsel, and we made a settlement to appease her rather than testing the allegations, and we're not apologizing for any of it, although they probably should be apologizing for writing that kind of check before anybody looked into the veracity of the allegations. Sorry for the long answer, but this story is really very, very poorly understood in the Canadian public.
It requires long. And I really think this is why you call it anti-social media. I'm not going to dispute calling it anti-social media. I think this is such a complex story, and people are trying to distill it into a tweet, and it is impossible. And I don't think we've been asking, the right questions in this instance. But let me just ask you this, Ari. Sure. You mentioned there was, the case in 2003. Then I see other Twitter journalists or Twitter activists that come out with a list of, a cajillion other alleged infractions by hockey players, right? Mm-hmm. But do we have an indication in our criminal justice system in Canada if hockey players are actually some different type of, for lack of a better term, beast when it comes to how often they're arrested, charged with these types of crimes or allegations?
So that's a fantastic question that picks up on something I was talking about the other day. One of the reasons the Canadian public is being misled, and I mean purposely misled, Elias, this is not by accident. You must always, in these situations, whether you agree with me or not, whether you like what I'm saying or not, I don't mean you, I mean the proverbial you, you must always follow the money. Who wins from this kind of scandal? Who gets more and better funding? Who gets more visibility on public airways? How do politicians gain from this? Can this be virtue signaled from the Prime Minister who says, my two boys in hockey I have to make sure aren't in danger, and presumes 8 young men to be guilty of rape, Elias? This is dangerous stuff, and because you introduced me this way, I'm not a bleeding heart criminal defense lawyer. I'll call somebody guilty as long as the day is can be. I will defend police officers as long as the day is can be. So you're not getting a bleeding heart here. When you go back to 2003, You now have incidents separated by 15 years. You have an extraordinarily small number of extraordinarily small settlements, all done for the reasons I've told you, because nobody wants to push back. People don't believe they should fight back against false allegations. They don't want a PR scandal because in this society, every man is presumed guilty. And to answer your question explicitly, the lack of reporting here about the NHL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, lacrosse leagues, football leagues. There is no epidemic in hockey, to use your term beast, where somehow these young men are, by the way, none of them arrested. So your point about getting arrested.
Yeah.
You look at the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NFL, any other league or major corporation, and you look at the number of sexual misconduct or sexual assault claims they go through, Elias, we are not even in the precipice of calling anything in Hockey Canada an epidemic. That doesn't mean any incident of sexual malfeasance isn't gross, serious, and heinous. The 2003 incident with the woman incapacitated on the pool table, that's not men having sex with her. If that's truthful, she's being raped. Hockey Canada is the byproduct of this going to put more people on notice to be careful. Don't go to hotel rooms with 6 of your buddies, whether it's consensual or not. But the lie in the telling of this, particularly at a time where Canada is in deep trouble and our MPs are preoccupied on all the wrong things, to tell the public that there's an epidemic of sexual violence because there's the Graham James case that took up $6 million. There's a number of very small settlements where the allegations have never been tested. If anybody thinks that's due process or liberal, well, then you have a very different definition of democratic process and liberal than me. And remember, Elias, to end my answer, all of these things are done with legal counsel, with people advising the women each and every step, some of the best lawyers in the country. So the idea that something is going on here that's chicanery or improper, I absolutely reject that, and I go back to the central thesis that this is a PR exercise used by the wrong people for the wrong purposes.
Ari, and I think we've done a really good job here. We've only still scratched the surface. I want to thank you so much for your insight this morning.
Good to be with you, Elias.
Ari Goldkind, criminal defense lawyer, CTV legal analyst.